What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Social Rejectz podcast.
Gang, gang.
If this is your first time tuning in, we are two dope black dudes who created the podcast you didn't know that you needed.
But you love every day.
Today's topic is going to be, should you or should you not remain single before you are 30 years old? We're going to be talking about things that may have changed from when our parents were growing up, career versus starting a family, and have you actually matured through your 30s? I'm sorry, have you actually matured through your 20s?
Way to mess up.
Shut up.
New.
Let's start the conversation off, Kendall. What are your thoughts and feelings about staying single before 30?
Like completely single? Like you just not even trying? Cause I get it. Like,
when I think stay single, I'm thinking like not being in a committed relationship.
The entire time?
Like not being
Bro,
tied down.
nah. Absolutely not. That don't make no sense. Like, I guess to some people it makes sense, obviously, or else we wouldn't be talking about it. But nah, that's a dub. Like, sorry. I guess dub isn't.
You feel like you need a relationship experience before 30?
I feel like any normal person in this country, whether they want to or not, unless they really, really, really don't want to, and I guess, again, that's the reason for the conversation, relationships happen. It's not something... Now, some people search, like some people are boy crazy / girl crazy, and they can't thrive unless they're in a relationship. But to go for 30 years and not be in a single committed relationship, that's crazy. Like, how is that even possible? That means you dated nobody serious in high school, nobody serious in college, nobody serious in the first half of your adult life. You was just hoeing around or being lame and standing in your house.
Well, a lot of people don't even count their relationships before a certain age. Like, I've known a lot of people to say that any relationship you had before 24 doesn't count.
Well, that's ignorant.
Well, is it?
What about people that marry their high school sweethearts?
Well, they're married, I guess.
Right, but they got married before 30 probably more times than not, usually.
I think the basis of that argument is that you mature so much over the course of your 20s that you've rediscovered who you are. And there's no reason why you can't do that in a relationship. I personally think that every relationship that you are in does matter because you're learning a little bit more and more about yourself.
Right, so to say a relationship doesn't count, that's just dumb.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily call it dumb because there is the relationship counts, but I think that the wording of that is a little bit more off-putting than what's actually the message. The message is that there are relationships that are less enlightening than other relationships because once you get to a certain place in life, you do start to learn yourself differently.
Right, and environments change. I don't want to say people change because I genuinely don't think people change. I think your inner thoughts, your inner mannerisms that weren't previously exposed become exposed over time. But I feel like the concept of people changing, they're not changing. That stuff was always there. It's just some people suppress certain traits or features that they don't want to admit to at certain times. But even with that, like, I genuinely feel like the relationships I had in my younger time were valid, were important for my long-term growth. I feel like there's things I did and things I learned in those relationships that helped mold me into who I am now. So to say that those don't count or those aren't valid for a reason of maturity or seriousness, to me is dumb. If you're in a relationship that means nothing, then you're not in a relationship, you're just pretending.
What do you mean in a relationship that means nothing?
Like, if you look at, like, let's say you had a boyfriend or a girlfriend in high school or college, and you didn't consider that serious, but y'all was together for years, that means you were faking it. That means in years of spending time with somebody, there was no connection, no genuine, solid connection, to where you don't think it counts. Then were you really in a relationship? Maybe the other person was in a relationship with you, but clearly you weren't in a relationship with that person.
That does happen. There are plenty of situations.
Right, I'm not saying it does or doesn't. I'm just saying it's dumb and wasting time because you're not growing, you're not maturing because you're not looking at that as a proper relationship.
Well, do you think that you have to be in a committed relationship to grow and mature?
No. You can be completely single because, this is where I differ with everybody. If you're ugly and you can't find somebody, you're still going to mature. You being in a relationship doesn't dictate your level of maturity. But the premise of not being in a relationship or not considering a relationship you're in before a certain age as valid or credible to your maturity, that in of itself is what I think isn't the smartest way to view it.
Well, I have a similar but different perspective. Personally, I think that any relationship that you're in, no matter how old you are, does matter because you are going to grow. And I feel that through relationships, only through relationships can we learn certain things about ourselves. Now, with that being said, I don't think it's going to hurt you to not be in a relationship before you're 30 years old. I think that the type of relationships that you find yourself in is going to be much limited. But I do think that there is a threshold of like milestones and things like that that you should be achieving in your 20s in terms of learning things about yourself that's going to change the way that you approach relationships when you're 30. Will I say that you absolutely cannot be in a relationship at that doesn't make sense. You can be in a relationship at any point in time.
Right.
But is it a good or bad idea to wait? I don't necessarily know. I definitely know it can't hurt because what you're looking at in your early 20s, you're probably going to be looking at differently in your 30s. But then again, at the same time, the reason why you're looking at things differently in your 30s is because of your experiences in your 20s. So perhaps if you haven't experienced a relationship, you won't mature in that aspect. I don't know.
Right, like
I
maturity.
can't really.
It won't, like, people don't mature across the board. That's not how it works. You mature in different avenues of life at different levels.
Yeah.
Like someone that's been career oriented is mature in that aspect. They know how to go into a business meeting and carry themselves. They know how to present an idea or an opinion in a professional manner. They've matured in that way because they've been working in that industry or that job path for a while. They've built the experience. That doesn't mean just because they're professional in that manner or they can handle themselves financially that they're going to be a good boyfriend or girlfriend. Because if they haven't experienced a relationship and haven't learned compromise and things like that with somebody else, they're still going to be immature in that aspect, which would then prolong them being in a serious relationship. Which is why I don't think, first off, I feel like it's probably more rare that you find someone that has been in 0 serious relationships before 30. Mm-hmm. Now, not to say that 1 or 2 or 10 or whatever, but to say that you went 30 years and hadn't had one single serious relationship, I find that hard to believe. Mm-hmm. Because relationships is the basis of us as a species. We get in relationships, we procreate, and we continue the growth of our species. That's the most primitive thing. So to be able to go 30 years, almost half your life, and not being in one serious relationship, that's hard for me to accept that somebody is able to pull that off without other reasons behind it, without it being like case by case reason, just generally speaking.
Well, I think it is always going to be case by case.
Right, but then in that case, usually when you have to go to case by case, it's because it's not common. When things become common, they stop being case by case.
Yeah, I would definitely agree that it's not common.
But then you also got to look at a perspective of someone, the likelihood of 2 people that chose not to date or not to be in serious relationships before 30 meeting each other and then working in a relationship is even less common. More times than not, the person that chose not to take a relationship or be in a relationship before 30 is going to end up with someone that's been in relationships and their maturity level is going to be different. And 9 times out of 10, actually, I don't want to say 9 times. I say like 6 times out of 10, 60% of the time, that relationship is going to be super rocky because you got one person who knows nothing about how to compromise. They're used to doing everything their way for so long. Mm-hmm. Now you got this other person whose relationships you're not going to agree on everything, but they're not going to be able to properly compromise. They're always going to want it their way because they've always had it their way.
Yeah, and when you are in a relationship, there's a certain like intimate language that you have to I don't want to say that you have to, but you bring to the table once you know yourself intimately and once you know yourself romantically, you know what you can do for someone else and you also know what you want in return. I would say in your 30s, that's kind of like, I can see people choosing not to settle down before 30, but I would say by the time you're 30, I'm not going to want to, if I'm 30 years old, I'm not going to want to date someone that's 30 that doesn't have their own idea of themselves.
Right.
Like being, you don't want to not know yourself. You don't want to have not yet found out who you were before you jump into a relationship. It's going to lead you to be clingy, obsessive, or just irrationally distant. It's just not going to be, you're not going to be a well-rounded 100% person on your own because you're going to be looking to find yourself in ways that you should have done at like 18, 19, and
Right,
23.
right. And that's the thing too is you're saying, and I think this conversation differs between men and women too. Like that is a major factor because men and women, we all know mature at different levels anyway.
Yeah.
And then you throw a relationship or a lack of a relationship into that equation that makes it even more complicated for someone to thrive.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'd be shocked if there's women who haven't had any serious relationships before 30. Because even like when I think back to like the girls I dated in high school and stuff like that, right after I got out of high school, those relationships, they were more serious about than I was up front. I had to mature into taking that relationship seriously.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like if you're a 30-year-old woman that hasn't been in a single serious relationship, you're not gonna attract the type of person you want at that time.
Yeah, no, because you don't know what, I don't want to say you don't know what you want, but you don't even know how to attract what you want yet.
Right. Like, you're going to attract someone that you don't want. You're going to attract somebody immature because you don't know.
In terms of relationship, you're immature.
Right.
Yeah.
But then if you attract someone that's immature in relationship, 9 times out of 10, they're also immature in other avenues.
Mm-hmm.
Because those things typically develop together.
Yeah, they do.
So if you manage to develop everything else but that aspect, then you run the risk of dating someone immature that you then have to bring and teach all the other stuff. On top
Teaching
of
is key.
learning how to be in a proper relationship.
Teaching is key. I feel like in my 30s, I don't want to teach anyone how to be in a relationship with me. I don't want to teach anyone how to.
If they're in the same age group as you, of course not.
Yeah.
But that's because you're going off the premise that you feel, well, you might be going off the premise that you feel that since you're at this age, you understand this much, they too at that same age should understand at least close to as much or something comparable to where you don't have to teach them.
Right.
But
or
if they're
there are
like
things that you guys can learn together.
Right. But if they're like 5 years younger than you, I don't even want to say 10 because that's gross. But
that's a lot.
Yeah, that's excessive. And I know our parents back in their day, that was all fine, but whatever. This isn't then. This is now. And that's gross. But like if they're 5 years younger than you, so you got someone 30 dating somebody that's 25. A 25-year-old is a year or two out of college.
Right.
A 25-year-old is barely in the career that they may or may not like yet. They haven't even figured that part out yet.
Right.
You're 30 plus.
Yeah, you've done.
So you already have exceeded so many physical milestones, achievements that this person is still trying to grasp. On top of y'all both being in an immature relationship status.
Right.
So I feel like it's not a smart path to go because it's too much room for error. And when it comes to relationship, you're already going to have given errors. You don't want to add. You don't want to complicate it even further by not even understanding how to handle it. Because let's say for argument's sake, it takes you 5. No, that's too many. Let's say it takes you like 2 strong, solid relationships before you figure out who you are and what you want. And let's say each relationship lasts 2 to 3 years. Then at 30, plus 6 years of 2 relationships that aren't set up to work long term, you're now 36. before you figure out who you are in a relationship.
Yeah, that's too much.
That means, and we're gonna round up because after 25, people don't really pay attention to age like that. 36 rounds up to 40. You're 40 years old and you just now figured out what kind of relationship you want to be in.
Yeah, that's a lot. In terms of what relationships standard are looking like in your 30s and 40s and how people are looking to like build foundations with people. I think that's one thing that really changes over time in terms of what you're looking, well, not what you're looking for, but how relationships are just going to function. When you're in your 20s, there's a lot of excitement and getting to know someone, dating, getting to know yourself.
Right, getting to know what you like in a relationship.
But when people are approaching that 40s, they're not trying to do this for fun. They're trying to settle down and build something with someone, build a foundation, build a life or a part of a life with someone.
Rebuild. 35 and up. A lot of those people already have kids.
Right. So we're starting over, or you're merging, and now you're spending.
Now you're learning a relationship, and you're learning somebody else's life.
Yeah, you're learning to be a parent. You're learning to be a husband, a wife, whatever.
All at the same time.
Yeah. If you just got, you can't get too far left back because then you're gonna have these laps running around you. I will not say that it's not possible.
Anything's possible. Relationships work like that. Literally anything's possible. You can have a person that is just like the people in the LGBT community who lived a straight life for 30, 40 years, had a wife, husband, kids, and then all of a sudden was like, nah, this ain't what I wanted. So I mean anything's possible. But in that same light, you have to be realistic about the situation.
Yeah, you do.
You have to, because to assume that you're gonna have some fairy tale ending.
I would definitely tell people not to keep yourself away from relationships because you don't want to. You feel like you have to wait until you're 30 to settle down or to be in a serious relationship. There are other reasons why people might want to not be in a relationship, but I definitely wouldn't advise someone to be like, I'm not going to be in a relationship until...
Right, that is not good advice at all. That's actually pretty bad advice. Now,
but
if you on your own do it because you choose career or whatever else over
that's
a relationship,
different. Or if you have just principles and values or whatever, that's fine.
That's your prerogative.
But the age alone is gonna make it more complicated in the end.
Right.
Regardless.
And for the people out there listening that's under 30, this is something you need to take into consideration in terms of what to look forward to as you grow. And for those over 30 who this might actually apply to, this is the stuff that needs to be considered.
Yeah.
Because even between me and you, our relationship lives are completely different from one another.
Right.
But yet, we chose certain routes, and we're okay with the routes that we chose because that's the lives that we chose to actually live.
Right. But it's full of experience, though. I can't imagine being 32 right now and just now starting out in the dating world.
For the first time, like in a that's wild.
That's crazy. That's a lot. I wonder how different things was with like our parents and our grandparents though, because we're talking about starting out in our 30s and versus our 20s, where I feel like our parents and grandparents or even great grandparents were starting out in their teens in terms of
and I mean, and that's just the way society has gone. Everything has gotten older and older. People have lived longer, so everything gets pushed back to match that.
Yeah,
to me, that's the most common denominator in this whole thing. Because in medieval times, girls were getting married off at 12 to an adult that was only 15.
Yeah.
They always made it seem like these girls were so young and these men were so old. These people died before 40. So clearly the men weren't that much older.
Yeah, everybody was really, really, really young. Yeah.
But then,
I think it's more so a measure of your lifetime. Like there must be a sense of...
a certain time, because
by a certain time you feel like, all right, well, I'm getting close to like the end of my life in a sense,
So I need to make sure I have an heir or something.
Or something. You just, I mean, nobody wants to die alone.
Right.
So even with nothing else, you want to feel like there's somebody there for you that your life wasn't in vain. So
Right.
you do start thinking about things like that. I talk to people about that all the time when I do have conversations about the importance of, you know, getting to know yourself and being your own person. We do talk about that a lot, but it is important to establish yourself independently, but it's also important to understand how you function in the lives and the intimate worlds of other people.
Right.
Because to be in a relationship, you're going to have to know how you're going to function in somebody's intimate space. If you're not certain of that, you're not going to be certain of, you're going to lose track of who you are inside of a relationship. And that's the worst thing that you can do.
Right.
The worst thing.
Turn into somebody who you really aren't for the sake of a relationship. That's not okay.
That's not okay. Or trying to change
That's
someone who you're
damaging.
with because you chose that person, but you're not. That's not who you want to be with. You want
Right.
to change them. That's
You're
not
trying
gonna,
to turn that person to who you really wanted to be.
or who you think you want them to be, and then,
Mm-hmm.
or you trying to change yourself to who you think they want you to be, and it turns into a desperate situation.
I feel
It
like
turns
that's the
into
thing too. I feel like our parents, our grandparents, those who came before us, I feel like they looked at it. They looked at the bigger picture, because so many people, like, I hear so many people talking about how their grandparents don't like each other, but they're still married. They had kids, they had their families, had their homes and stuff like
Right.
that.
Yeah.
Then I generally feel like they were looking at a bigger picture. They weren't looking at just themselves,
Just
their
themselves,
growth. They
yeah.
were looking at
The legacy.
exactly.
Yeah.
And I feel like nowadays we don't care as much. I don't want to say we don't care at all, because I know me personally, I don't care. But
We don't care as much as they did.
no, I don't care at all.
Even the people that do care, like you said, the world itself has changed. That was premise of society.
Right.
So even though there are people that do care, you don't care as much as our grandparents did, because
Nah.
that was basic. That was
Literally.
that was why you did all of this. That's why you're having sex. That's why you're having kids. That's why you're getting married. It had nothing to do with
pleasure.
Yeah.
Desire.
Right. It was like, you know, we getting a little, them digits is getting a little,
them
them
birthdays coming.
Them
frequent.
birthdays is coming real abundant. So we gonna need to like shut this down for real. So we definitely don't care about it as much as they did, but I think that they were up against so much more than we were. That opposition comes along with the reality of, okay, well,
I wouldn't
think
say
about what
so
matters.
much more. It's just a different style, like different set of opposition.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I still think if you haven't been in one serious relationship before 30, there's probably something wrong.
Yeah, normally I would not agree with you on
I'm just
on that,
saying.
but
There's
there
probably something wrong.
it can be a red flag if you have not been in a serious relationship before you're 30 years old. That might be a red flag, and I say that with a grain of salt because it doesn't necessarily have to.
There's always
But
exceptions to the
when
rules.
something is wrong, you typically don't realize something is wrong until you bump against that wall. So you can be going into your 30s not realizing that there's some internal work that you need to do before you're in a relationship. You'll never realize that until you actually get into a few, not even just one, your first few relationships, and realize, okay, there's some repair work that you need to do on yourself.
Right.
So when you say something's wrong or there's a red flag, 9 out of 10 times, yeah, there's a reason. It's one, especially if you chose not to, or you chose to be like, when this relationship gets serious, I'm gonna step out of it. I'm gonna bow out of it. That's also a flag. Now, there's also a flag to say that none of my relationships worked out. You know, is it possible? Of course, but if things are not working out, then that's kind of like something for you to. It's kind of for something for you to think about. I find that a lot of times when people are in these cycles of relationships just not working out, it's because they don't have a good relationship with themselves, and they're trying to find someone to
fill the void that they should be filling.
Exactly. They're trying to find their other half when you need to be your other half.
You
and
need
just
to be
find
whole first.
Yeah, you gotta be both halves, and you in a relationship, and it's just nice to be there. I had a mentor that used to say all the time, like, he was like, I love my wife, and it's nice when she's here, and she's in the room with me, but I also have to make the space nice when she's not here because I have to be 100% myself. So I'm not with her because I need to be with her. I'm with her because I choose to be with her.
Right. That's how I feel.
That's just such a different concept of saying I'm lacking and I feel incomplete. Let me find somebody else that completes me.
No, but I feel what your mentor was saying. Like, you need to be able to stand on your own 2 feet, and if you choose to have another pair of feet with you to help achieve even a higher level or help offset so you don't have to do as much, then that's completely fine. But then I also can see, after being in a serious relationship for an extended amount of time, you feel like that person added so much to you that they are another half of you. So when you're not with that person, that separation kicks in. If that makes sense.
I see that as building a new life. Like, I feel like I'm 100%, you're 100%. We get married, we build a new 100.
A new 100%.
We build a whole new 100. And so now I'm used to having 150%.
Right.
Or I'm used to having 200, and now I have my 100 plus this new thing that we built, this new project or this new entity or this new family and this new identity that we built. Yeah, you're going to feel anxious about being separated from that because that is now a new normal for you. But it doesn't mean that you individually can't be a person
by yourself. Yeah.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
All right, so boom. We got to hit the moral of the story because we are
overtime like always. Whatever, it's okay. So, moral of the story.
Moral of the story.
If you're under 30 and you haven't been in a single serious relationship,
not one,
reevaluate what your life goals are. Seriously.
Reevaluate. I agree.
If you're over 30 and you happen to be this rare anomaly that hasn't been in a serious relationship, I would say seek a therapist because there's probably an underlying issue. You may not be aware of it. And mental health is a real thing. And a lot of times we use other things to cover up issues that we don't want to talk about or we don't want to acknowledge.
Yep.
Because in a country where there's 300 million people and even ugly people have people, if you're not ugly, you should probably figure out what's going on. Unless you're doing this completely on purpose. But then even then, you should probably talk to someone because that's not healthy.
Nobody's ugly.
Bro, there's plenty of ugly people.
Nobody's ugly.
There's plenty of people whose parents are related, therefore their kids are ugly. It's science.
Nobody's ugly.
On the inside, maybe. No, even then, there's plenty of ugly people on the inside. They got terrible personalities.
Ugly on the inside.
So how can you be ugly on the inside but not ugly on the outside?
That's not what we're talking about today.
Anyway.
Thank you guys for tuning in and being a part of this conversation. I hope that y'all had some good takeaways. Next week, we are going to be talking about astrology. Well, it's not next week. It's in the next episode because we post every couple of days. So next episode, we're going to be talking about astrology, zodiac signs. What do you guys think?
The stars.
The stars.
Auroralis Boris. Somebody correct me in the comments. I already know. People hate
Where were you going with that just now?
It's a name of something in space. I don't know if it's I don't know.
Aurora Borealis?
That's what it is.
Wow. Wow.
Listen here, algorithm. I don't want to hear that.
Wow. That's astrology?
Isn't it? That's
no.
What's that?
That's the Northern Lights.
That's space. That's the effects of like stuff in space happening with the sun and the atmosphere and whatnot.
That's wow. Okay, we got some talking to do. We got some talking.
I'm gonna Google it.
Google the Aurora.
I'll be ready next episode.
Thank you guys for tuning in, and we'll catch you later. Peace.
Peace.